If you're called, you know it, and it's undeniable. And you are the only one who can say yes or no to the calling.
Welcome to the Midlife Reinvention Podcast, a podcast helping women in career and life transitions achieve clarity on their next steps so they can transform uncertainty into an energizing next chapter. I'm your host, Kavita Ahuja, and the founder of It's My Time Now Coaching. If you're wondering what's next in your career or life, you are in the right place. Through solo and guest episodes, you'll gain practical tips, tools, and inspiration to help you uncover blocks, gain confidence, and be, do, and have what you want. I rediscovered myself after the age of 50, and I know you can too. It's my time now to help you do just that. I'm so excited you're here. Let's dive in. Are you holding yourself back from living the life you really want? In this next episode of the Midlife Reinvention Podcast, I sit down with Anjel B. Hartwell, a top expert in helping people make meaningful changes in their lives. Anjel shares her journey of reinvention and offers practical advice on how to tap into your potential, overcome fear, and create a life and career that truly fit who you are. In this episode, you will find out the 5 common ways people block wealth and success and how to break those habits. Learn simple steps to build confidence and follow through on your goals, and get clarity on how to turn your passions into a practical plan for the next stage of your life. So get inspired and start taking action towards your reinvention today. And don't forget to stay till the end for the key takeaways. Welcome to another episode of the Midlife Reinvention Podcast, a career and life transitions podcast. If you are asking yourself, what's next? You are in the right place. I interview incredible women across the globe for this podcast who share their stories of reinvention and who will give you their insights and expertise on how to rediscover who you really are, what you really want, and how to get there in your next stage of life. This week, I'm absolutely thrilled to have on the show Anjel B. Hartwell. Anjel, known as the Wealthy Life Mentor, is one of America's premier experts on creating conscious change and living in a wealthy life by design. Working with thousands of entrepreneurs throughout her 35-plus year career, Anjel knows how to create proactive and catalytic change that creates client breakthroughs in all areas of life. She is a creator and executive producer and host of the 14-time award-winning and Apple #1 internationally ranked Wickedly Smart Women podcast, and also of the new Top 50 internationally ranked 3-time award-winning Leading Visionaries podcast. Anjel established an international reputation as an author of 7 books and contributing author to another 21. Wow, I'm so thrilled to have you on the show today, Anjel. How are you doing?
I am well, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Kavita.
Just to start, as a woman, I've reinvented myself. And I love to really understand how my guests have gone through their own kind of transitions and reinvention. So that our listeners can, really understand the challenges and rewards of transitions in life. So you are currently the founder and of the Creative Age Consulting Group, but you have titles as an entrepreneurial artist, an Empress of Empowerment, the Torch of Transformation, and the Wizard of Words. So those are all really interesting titles that I don't think I've ever heard of before. So please tell our listeners, what was the catalyst behind each of these transformations? And also kind of how did it lead to where you are today?
Fabulous. Well, I spent 20 years in the real estate business.
Uh-huh.
My last project was 51 single-family houses, 56 apartments in an office building with 2 partners. And I was also the national chairperson of my trade association at the time. And I had a spiritual awakening. We also had a life rupture in our family. So I had this spiritual awakening, and as a result of the spiritual awakening, I ended up doing a lot of transformation. So the first thing was I got clear that I needed to divorce my first husband. I have two husbands. They was my husband. I got clear at the end of the divorce process that I needed to divorce my two business partners. And I also got clear that there was all of these latent parts of myself that I didn't know existed before that awakening experience. So some of the parts that came out were my author. That's the Wizard of Words, right? Some of the parts that came out was my healer. That's really the torch of transformation, because in the role I play when I'm playing the role of the healer, I'm bringing light in to illuminate the darkness for people wherever the darkness might be, whether it's a client who has a multi-six-figure offer and she's hiding doing administrivia, or it's a client that has created something and they've burned themselves out in the process and they need to like really rethink and look at it. So as the healer aspect of myself, the torch of transformation, I literally bring the light in and support my clients to be able to see what needs to be shifted so that they can then take the action to shift it. The other titles, let's see, what other titles did we mention there?
You said the
Empress of Empowerment.
Empress of Empowerment.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah. So the Empress of Empowerment, that emerged. So let me just do a little story here. So what happened after my spiritual awakening was I did all those divorces, and then I began to discover all of these latent parts of myself that I didn't know existed. The artist, the healer, the author, the speaker, the performer, all of these aspects of self that had been suppressed, repressed, depressed in my little boxy world that I had in the real estate business. And so part of the work was really giving myself permission to explore and allow those latent parts of myself to not only be germinated, but also to be fertilized and given space to grow. And so what I ended up doing initially when I left the real estate business was I just gave myself that permission. I allowed art to come out of me. I allowed myself to start writing. I allowed myself to explore the healing arts and discover that my hands, if I put them on people, can heal things, which was not something that was in my awareness until it became in my awareness. So I gave myself that permission for a couple of years. And then I got the call. I really got this calling to begin sharing that you can leave behind an old life and you can transform yourself and you can do it in a way that allows you to be healthy, wealthy, and wise. You can do it in a way that allows you to generate money. And certainly at the beginning, I made a lot of experiments. I'll call them experiments, where I was doing all these things. And so one of my experiments was an art gallery, because all this art started pouring out of me.
Right.
Like now I'm a juried artist now, and all of this art started pouring out of me. So I was like, okay, I have art pouring out of me and I'm on this healing journey. So I ended up opening an art gallery and healing art center. And I ran that for a couple of years in the heart of my city.
Wow.
And it was a stage upon which I was able to express my artistry, support other artists. It was an enormous, enormous money suck. Right. So I definitely have had ups and downs in my my journey. Yes. But those are some of the titles, and so the Empress of Empowerment came when I ended up closing the art gallery and got the call to start speaking and being a messenger. Okay. And sharing the message of transformation, that you could transform. And my work for a long time was really helping women to feel empowered, mostly women, and a few very wise men.
Yes.
So,
wow. Yeah. I love that, because one of the things you said is that you discovered the latent part of yourself. And I think that's so important for listeners to hear, because often we might ignore those parts of ourselves that maybe we've forgotten, or just life has just gotten in, not in the way, but just it's gone on, and it's like we've forgotten who we are. And so you've discovered your author, your healer, your artist and speaker, and now you're empowering women. So, and you're helping other entrepreneurs and women and men, I believe, to heed their calls. So how do you actually, firstly, why is that so important? And how do you actually go about helping or advising these people to do that?
Yeah, great question. So, why is it so important? Well, the first reason why it's so important is because these latent gifts that we carry from a meta level, from a macro level, we were brought to life to bring those gifts to life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, our calling, the way I visualize and understand the calling is the desire of my own heart to serve the gifts that it came to deliver in this lifetime. And the calling is also simultaneously the prayers of the people for whom I can deliver my gifts. That they're praying for that help. They're praying for either a solution to a problem or a fulfillment of a desire, or in some cases for a rite of passage. And they may not consciously know that they're praying for a rite of passage, but often when they come to me, that's exactly what they're praying for is at
Mm-hmm.
some divine level, they are ready to take the rite of passage. And like, just as an example, I've had many clients in the past who got a calling to serve
Mm-hmm.
like this, who said yes to the calling, just like you and I have, who set themselves up in business, but who did not really understand or account for the fact that a business requires certain things in order for the business to thrive, and that the owner also requires certain things in order for the business to thrive. And so they've set themselves up in a way where they're either just barely succeeding or they're not quite succeeding at the level that they actually know that they can. And sometimes it's just a little structural shift that needs to happen. Sometimes it's a big mindset shift that needs to happen to help those people, especially people who've come from corporate, to understand that the business needs to be fed.
Mm-hmm.
And the owner needs to be fed. And so the rite of passage is going from employee to owner, right? There's a rite of passage, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a different role that you're playing. And when you've been in an employee role for decades, it's the norm for you. It's not natural necessarily to step into the role of owner. So that's an example. And the calling really is those prayers, the people who are out there praying for either the solution to the problem, the fulfillment of the desire, or the rite of passage. Those prayers are going into the atmosphere, and they are reaching my heart and strumming my heartstrings. And that's when we know we have a match,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's my gifts that I'm here to deliver and what they are praying for. And that's where the match is made.
I really love that. I actually never heard that kind of stated that way, because we always think we have these callings that we want to share our gifts, and we put them out to the world and hoping that people will receive it. But I guess it's kind of like you just kind of described the law of attraction, right? So if a person is praying, as you said, praying for whatever they need and what they require, and somehow or other there's that match there, it's kind of like magic. It just kind of, it's an
It is magic.
attraction that's a magnet, right?
It is
So
magic.
I guess that kind of leads into my next question in terms of I watched one of your presentations, which was called the Wealth Short Talk. And you talk about people's relationships with money, right? And in it, I'll quote something you said. You said, to be a change maker, you must be able to receive and channel the money in the direction of your dreams and the impact that you're here to make. So you mentioned that wealth is more than just money. So it's the sum total of all the resources that are available to you. So in that talk also, in your practice, you also talk about 5 ways we ward off wealth. I don't know if we have time to talk about all 5 ways, or maybe you can give us a brief.
I'll do a quickie.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. So, first, let me define what I believe wealth and a wealthy life consists of. And it is the sum total of all the resources that we have available to us. So, I like to use the word thief, THIEF, as a mnemonic device because we are often stealing from ourselves in one or more of these areas when we're warding off wealth.
Hmm.
So, time, our health, our imagination, which is the marriage of our intellect and our intuition. Our ecosystem of exchange, this is where the money lives. The ecosystem of exchange is the people that we surround ourselves with and who we do business with.
Mm-hmm.
And fun with our friends, family, and fellows on the path. So that's the areas, all the different resources that we have available to us. And what often happens, I see often, sometimes we martyr ourselves to the calling. So we give up our time, we give up our health, we steal from our health, we end up burned out in one way or another because we have martyred ourselves to our calling and we haven't structured ourselves properly so that not only is the calling served, but we're served as well in the process of being the servant to the calling. And so the 5 ways we ward off wealth, the first one is worry. When we worry, we are actually, I see it psychically because that was another one of my latent gifts that popped open was my psychic abilities. I see worry as this dark gray, musty smelling, nasty old army blanket that we wrap around whatever we're worried about. So if you're worried about money, that's what's wrapped around money.
Mm-hmm.
Energetically, and that wards it off, that sends it running. Like, who wants to be embraced in that way with worry, right?
Right.
So worry is one. Withdrawal is another one. So let's say somebody's listening to this and they are feeling really resonant and they are feeling really inspired in the moment, and they are thinking, oh, I really need to connect with either Kavita or Angel because it's time for me to do something. And then they're on fire and they're inspired and they have that knowing that it's time to take action, but then they pull back.
Mm-hmm.
They withdraw. And when we withdraw, we're literally taking ourselves off the court. We're taking ourselves out of the game. We're taking ourselves off the court. And of course, wealth and a wealthy life are going to be difficult to attain if you're not playing the game.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Waffling is a third one. And I like to use the example of, let's say you're an entrepreneur at an entrepreneurial event and the person on stage makes you a $10,000 offer to do the next thing that you know is the right next step for you and your business. And you go to the ladies' room to take the break and your best friend texts you and says, oh my God, you know that cruise we've been looking at in the Mediterranean for the last 5 years that was $25,000? It's on sale today for $10,000. So now you have the entrepreneurship or the cruise ship, the entrepreneurship or the cruise ship. And you don't make any decision at all and both ships sail. So that's waffling.
Okay.
So that's the third one. Then we have whining. Whining often happens over wine. And when we're whining over wine, 2 things are happening. Number one, we are reducing our consciousness because we're consuming the alcohol. Wine will reduce and lower your consciousness, and it will lower your vibrational state. So number one, that's happening. And number two, generally when we're whining over wine, there's other people that we're whining to. And so all of those people are colluding with our complaining rather than being problem solving and taking action. Now, there is a place when things aren't working for you to bring what's not working. That's where you go to your mentor, your coach, your consultant. That's the place for bringing up what's not working. Whining, however, is actually just going to lower your vibration, especially over wine. Mm-hmm. And you're going to now have this group of colluders who are colluding with your complaining.
Right.
And then the last way that we ward off wealth is waiting on. And waiting on looks like waiting on the handsome prince to come and rescue us. Or it looks like waiting on our ugly stepsisters. And I have done this myself. I have been in groups, small and large, where I'm so busy helping everybody else in the group that I am stealing from my own time to focus on my own business.
Mm-hmm.
I'm minding everybody else's business and I'm letting my business go to shit. So I did that for a good 2 or 3 years in my business. I did that in a big mastermind group that I was in. The founder of the mastermind group was making millions and millions of dollars, and I was taking care of everybody and making nothing out of in compensation for doing the work that I was doing. So, and all of these came from, I've done every single one of them.
Okay. Obviously couldn't help but notice they all start with W, warding off wealth.
Yeah, keeps
worry,
it easy.
Yeah, worry, withdrawal, waffling, whining, and waiting on. Interesting. You mentioned a few times, Angel, about the vibration. Like all these, as you were speaking, all these ways we ward off wealth lower our vibration, right? And therefore they don't allow the abundance to flow. And I know we talked a little bit about, and I talk a lot about this catabolic energy that happens when we have these thoughts and the actions that we take, like what you just mentioned, the 5 things. And so it seems natural to me that when we have those, they don't allow for that positive energy to come into your life, and therefore that abundance, right? So,
well, they in many cases they will catalyze catastrophe.
Yes. Yeah.
It's even worse. It's even worse than them actually preventing the goodness from coming in. It's what it is actually catalyzing is more of the same.
Yes, absolutely.
More of the same.
Yes. Yeah. Wonderful. And so these came about as, how did you come to realize these things? Was it part of your kind of, I know that you mentioned you had a spiritual awakening, or was it all part of all of your experiences that this is kind of
it definitely came out of my entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah.
And I like to say that you're stepping into the entrepreneurial journey is a spiritual path. It really is a spiritual path.
Yes.
Especially if you're called, right? And so most all of these came out of the experiences that I had watching, in retrospect, myself do the things. Like I said, for 2 or 3 years, I was in this mastermind group that was a multi-5-figure investment for everybody to be in. And the owner of the group was making millions and millions of dollars. And I was running around waiting on everyone else and not focusing. I was doing business. I was making money. I was doing my own work. However, I squandered so much of my time unnecessarily.
Yes.
By doing this waiting on behavior.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Where had I used that time and energy in different ways, I might have been healthier. I might have been more financially rewarded. I might have used that time to spend more time with my friends and family. It was out of my entrepreneurial experiences that all of this was distilled, the 5 ways that we ward off wealth.
Often we have listeners, my clients, I'm sure your clients as well, people listening, they want to do something in their life, but they're held back by fear. And I guess the other part of that is, how did you develop the courage to, I guess, carry on these different reinventions or transformations in your life? And what do you see with your clients, and what are some of the main things that, I guess it's a 2-part question, is like the fears as well as the courage. Like, how did all of that kind of transform?
Well, for me personally, let me start with me personally. For me personally, when I had my spiritual awakening, thankfully, I had a community. I was in the yoga community by then. I had started yoga about 5 months before the spiritual awakening happened. So when it happened, instead of taking myself off to the psychiatrist for some medication, for some pharmaceuticals, I had a community that affirmed, oh, you're having a spiritual awakening. And so that was really helpful. So I'm going to affirm for any of your listeners who are in that moment themselves, if all of a sudden your life is exploding, let me say that is very likely that you are having a spiritual awakening, and it doesn't need to be medicated. It just needs to be allowed and embraced and welcomed and accepted. And so step 1 is I had a small community, a yoga community, that helped me to understand what I was experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
Step two was I started journaling a lot, and journaling allowed me to have some documentation that showed me that miraculous and amazing things were happening in my life,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some things were definitely falling apart, but at the same time, I was having these miraculous, wonderful, surprising, out of the blue things happening. And so to journal that allowed me to have some kind of concreteness,
Right.
some kind of material touch point, right? That I could refer back to on bad days. And number three, things just kept getting better, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the better it gets, the better it gets. One of the things that did definitely happen and will likely happen to anybody who's going through this process is there's certainly a lot of pushback and a lot of resistance that you might face from society, from your culture, from your family. I mean, my mother went crazy when I left my real estate career. She was not happy at
Yeah.
all.
Right.
I was newly divorced with a 7-year-old, and now I was taking my income out from underneath me. She went crazy. She did not like that at all. And there
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of pushback from
Yeah.
her, a
Yeah.
lot. And and she also did not understand at all. She did not understand at all what I was experiencing and
Mm-hmm.
couldn't get there. So making sure that you're invested in support is part of what allows the courage to grow and build,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because when you make an investment, you're actually affirming with your cash on the line to the universe that you're in. I'm in
Yeah.
on this. I'm in on this. It's not sufficient to give it lip service. You
Yeah.
got to be all in. You got to be all in. And
Right.
you've got to be willing to take all kinds of risks. I've
Mm-hmm.
taken I mean, at one point in my journey, I used my son's college fund to take care of the mortgage for a few months, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what I needed to do at the time to make sure that we were well and that he wasn't ready for college yet. So I used that money to make sure that we stayed well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so that I think that's the other thing that I want the listeners to hear is it's important for you to have a commitment to wellness and a devotion to your well-being, because as the messenger, you are the voice and face of your business. And it's important for you to be well. People can feel it
Yeah.
now. People are much more energetically sensitive. They can feel it if you're on the edge of burnout, or if you're desperate, or if you're coming from a place of, my God, I need to have a client come soon, or any of that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
People can feel it. You can
Mm-hmm.
try and suppress it, but
Right. It comes
it's
through.
felt.
It
It
comes
comes
through.
through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that because the things you mentioned, the community journaling and things do get better and that pushback. And I know I definitely experienced that when I left my corporate job because it was like very safe and everything seemed perfect. And it was like, well, what are you doing? Like, why are you leaving this? And
Mhm.
especially after 50, like, oh my goodness, right? And it's because people don't understand, like you said, people don't understand what you're going through, but like that, being able to find that support for people who do understand and have that and the commitment to wellness that gives you the courage. So those are great points because you're going to have obstacles in your way, but how do you develop the courage to move forward, right? And a lot of my clients, or most of my clients who come to me, are really want to do something, right? They may be on the verge of wanting to explore their passions or wanting to go back and say, what am I going to do next? But they're held back by these fears. So you talk about conscious change. And so how do we actually move forward, right? Despite these fears.
Right. At the end of the day, it really is about saying yes to your calling and then doing whatever it takes to invest in getting the support to be able to bring that calling to life in the easiest, most efficient, most energetically aligned, and most profitable way possible. because people can spend years. I mean, at the beginning for me, I was literally throwing spaghetti against the wall when I got the calling. One of the first things I said was, "Oh, I need a website. Great, I'll teach myself HTML." And I literally taught myself HTML, right? And that's where Wizard of Words came from, because I then started selling website design and creation to people initially, because I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know how to make an offer. I mean, yes, I was in the real estate business, but this kind of calling based business is a different kind of structure.
Yeah.
It has its own quirks. And so it was about 3 or 4 years of literally throwing spaghetti against the wall before I finally invested, like really seriously invested. Like I took my home equity line and invested to work with somebody to help me to structure things and to also be able to really just get clear on the value that I was offering and be able to express that in a clear way.
Mm-hmm.
That at the end of the day, if you have a calling, unless you are extremely wealthy and you just want to do it philanthropically, you need to create money in
Mm-hmm.
order to create the structure, the ship, the entrepreneurship that's going to take your message out into the world. The money is the fuel of that ship. And so I would say, if you are really seriously about creating conscious change, understand that your ship is going to require fuel, and it's your job as the captain of that ship to make sure you're doing, just at the base level, doing the right math to make sure that you have enough support. Like, do you have a navigator on your ship? Do you
Mm-hmm.
have crew on your ship? Or are you trying to run the whole ship by yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Right? We
Right.
need to remember that you're going to have to create a monetization structure that is
Yeah.
going to allow you to have all the support that you need so that you can shine in the role that you're here to play as the facilitator of the change that you offer into the world and the communicator of that change.
Mm-hmm. Also important, and it's so important because, as you said earlier, it's calling based businesses. We all want to do good, but in order to do good and spread our calling, we have to have, again, like you said, that ship that's efficient and sales moves forward efficiently.
Right.
And
And
yeah,
sales.
and sales. Exactly.
Sales, SAILS and SALES. Yeah. Yeah. I had a client that came to me a few years ago. She had a podcast and she had invested thousands, hundreds of thousands. She was up to $200,000 of investment that she had made. So it wasn't like she wasn't invested, but she invested in things like branding, and she was spending $2,000 a month to get booked on podcasts. And she had all of these web people helping her, and she didn't have an offer. She wasn't making any money. She had already invested $200,000. So sometimes it's not that you're not investing, it's that you're not investing in the right things
Place.
at the right time. Right.
Right.
And when she came to me, she invested another 50 to work with me. But within 75 days, she had a $10,000 sale. Within 100 days, she had a $12,000 sale. And within 6 months, she had a $40,000 month after 3 years of having no money coming in. So, and she stopped paying to get booked on podcast.
That's a great story. So I guess that leads me. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that, all this wealth of information that you have. And where can people find you? And if there's anything you'd like to share about your business or.
Great. As you mentioned, I'm a 14-time award-winning podcaster. I have 2 podcasts, but today for this particular interview, I think I just want to talk about Wickedly Smart Women. You were on it. In fact, I believe today your episode dropped.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yes, you might want to check your email.
Okay.
And so Wickedly Smart Women, what we have right now, I have a new resource that just got created. It's called the Wickedly Smart Women's Roadmap to Get Started Consulting. And it's 10 signs that it's time for you to consider getting started consulting. And you can get that at wickedlysmartwomen.com/roadmap.
Fantastic.
So
Thank you.
that's a brand new, highly valuable resource. And of course, tune in to the show. Download, rate, review. We love 5 stars.
Yes.
And yeah,
it's a fantastic podcast, by the way. If anybody has.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
it's
you.
wonderful.
And from there, everything in my world connects with everything else. So if anybody wants to actually have a connection call with me, you can just click the magic button when you get to the Wickedly Smart Women site or through the roadmap. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Angel, I feel so fortunate to have you on the show and providing all of your wealth of knowledge and experience. And maybe just a final word to the listeners as to anything on your mind.
Yeah. If you're called, you know it, and it's undeniable. And you are the only one who can say yes or no to the calling. And you can go easy or you can go hard. But generally speaking,
Yes.
you're going to go one way or the other.
Right.
You're going to go one way or the other, because it's really ultimately at the end of the day, your soul pulling you forward, your future self pulling you forward.
Yes.
And the reason you came to the earth pulling you forward. And so have courage.
Yes.
You can do it. If I can do it, if Kavita can do it, you can do it.
Yes.
And just get support for yourself.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And and if you do need support, Angel's here. I'm here. And thank you so much for listening. And thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Midlife Reinvention podcast. Today's conversation with Anjel B. Hartwell was packed with valuable insights on transformation, following your calling, and stepping into your potential. Here are the 3 key takeaways from our discussion. Number 1, your calling is clear. You know it's there, and only you can decide whether to follow it. It's the bridge between your unique gifts and the people waiting for them. Number 2, courage and support go hand in hand. Making changes in life and career can feel daunting, but having the right guidance makes the process manageable and meaningful. And number 3, wealth is more than just money. It's about making the most of your time, energy, and relationships to create a fulfilling and purpose-driven life. If this episode resonated with you, take a moment to think about what's pulling you forward and how you want your next chapter to look. The first step might be reflection, reaching out for support, or making a decision that's been on your mind for a while. I'd love to hear your thoughts and questions, so feel free to reach out to me. You can also learn more about how I help women like you rediscover their purpose and create a fulfilling life by visiting my website, itsmytimenowcoaching.com. Until next time, my friend, take one small step forward to what you truly want. You've got this. Take care, and I'll see you in the next episode.